The Arabian Desert. Daytime temperatures soar above 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The sun beats down mercilessly on endless dunes, while sand-laden winds scour everything in their path. When night falls, temperatures plummet toward freezing. This is one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. For over 1,000 years, Bedouin nomads called this hostile wasteland home. They didn't just survive these brutal conditions, they thrived here, raising families and herds across vast stretches of burning sand. But here's what seems impossible. In some of the hottest places on Earth, these desert masters chose to live under black fabric, not white, not light-coloured, black. The Bedouin tent, known as al-Sha'ar, the house of hair, defied every logical assumption about desert survival. This is how they turned black goat hair into the most sophisticated climate control system ever woven. Please share in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced or learned any traditional survival skills yourself, we'd love to hear your wisdom. Subscribe for more ancient knowledge. The desert offers no mercy. Daytime heat climbs beyond 120 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the sand into a furnace that burns through leather boots and blisters exposed skin in minutes. When the sun disappears behind the dunes, temperatures can plummet 40 degrees or more, leaving families shivering under stars that offer no warmth. Sand-laden winds arrive without warning, turning day into night with walls of grit that strip paint from metal and skin from bone. During winter months, sudden rains transform dry wadis into raging torrents that can sweep away anything in their path. This is the environment that shaped one of humanity's most ingenious survival solutions. In the heart of this unforgiving landscape stands a structure that seems to defy all logic. The Beit al-Sha'ar, the house of hair, appears as a low, elongated rectangle stretched across the desert floor like a giant black shadow. Its roof barely reaches the height of a tall man, supported by wooden poles that disappear into the darkness beneath. To the untrained eye, it looks almost primitive, a simple shelter cobbled together from whatever materials the desert might provide. Yet beneath this deceptively modest exterior lies one of the most sophisticated climate control systems ever developed by human hands. The tent represents the culmination of centuries of trial, error, and careful observation by the nomadic tribes of Arabia, the Levant, and the Sinai Peninsula. These were not accidental discoveries, but deliberate innovations passed down through generations of desert dwellers who understood that survival in their harsh environment required more than just endurance. It demanded engineering brilliance disguised as everyday craftsmanship. Every thread, every seam, every structural element of the Beit al-Sha'ar serves multiple purposes, working together to create a living shelter that adapts to the desert's changing moods. The first mystery that confronts anyone studying this remarkable structure is perhaps the most puzzling. Why would people living in some of the hottest places on Earth choose to cover themselves with black fabric instead of white? Common sense suggests that dark colours absorb heat while light colours reflect it. Every modern survival manual recommends light-coloured clothing for desert travel. Yet the Bedouin, after countless generations of desert life, deliberately chose the darkest possible material for their homes. Even more perplexing, they wove this fabric from coarse goat hair rather than smooth cotton or linen that would seem more comfortable against the skin. The answer reveals itself not in any single characteristic, but in the complex interaction of materials, design, and environmental forces. The Bedouin tent functions as a self-adjusting climate system that breathes in the heat, tightens against rain, and wraps its inhabitants in insulation when cold desert nights threaten to freeze the unwary. This is not a static shelter but a dynamic organism that responds to its environment with the precision of a finely tuned instrument. The genius of this system lies in its ability to harness the very forces that make the desert so deadly and transform them into tools of survival. The scorching heat that can kill becomes the engine that drives cooling airflow through the tent. The fierce winds that can blind and disorient become gentle breezes channeled through carefully positioned openings. The sudden rains that can flood and destroy trigger the tent fabric to seal itself, creating a waterproof membrane from what moments before was a breathable canopy. This transformation occurs without electricity, without moving parts, without any of the complex mechanisms that modern climate control systems require. The tent achieves its remarkable performance through the careful selection and arrangement of natural materials, each chosen for properties that complement and enhance the others. The result is a shelter that provides comfort and protection while remaining light enough to carry, strong enough to endure, and simple enough to repair with materials found in the desert itself. The Beit al-Sha'ar stands as proof that some of humanity's most elegant solutions emerged not from laboratories or universities, but from the accumulated wisdom of people whose very survival depended on understanding their environment with absolute precision. The transformation of coarse goat hair into sophisticated shelter fabric followed an annual rhythm that connected the Bedouin tent to the natural cycles of desert life. Each spring, as temperatures began their relentless climb towards summer extremes, the goats were sheared using simple but effective tools that had remained unchanged for generations. The timing of this harvest was critical, as the animals needed their winter coats to survive the cold desert nights but could not endure the blazing summer heat while carrying a full fleece. The freshly cut hair was immediately sorted by experienced hands that could judge the quality and characteristics of individual fibers by touch alone. The finest hair, with its ideal balance of strength and workability, was reserved for the tent roof where structural integrity mattered most. Coarser fibers found their way into ropes and anchor lines where pure tensile strength took priority over appearance. The middle grades became the raw material for side panels and interior furnishings where comfort and durability needed to be balanced. This sorting process represented the first stage of engineering, as the women who performed this work understood that the final performance of the tent depended on matching each fiber to its optimal application. Cleaning and preparation of the sorted hair required intimate knowledge of desert resources and traditional techniques. The raw fibers carried dust, vegetable matter, and the natural oils that had protected the living animal but needed to be partially removed for optimal spinning and weaving. Desert plants provided soaps and cleaning agents that could accomplish this task without the harsh chemicals that would damage the hair's essential properties. The cleaned fibers were then combed and aligned using tools carved from wood or bone, preparing them for the spinning process that would transform individual hairs into continuous thread. The creation of yarn from prepared goat hair demanded both physical skill and deep understanding of fiber behavior. Bedouin women used drop spindles, simple devices consisting of a wooden shaft weighted with a carved whorl, to draw out the fibers and twist them into strong, consistent thread. The spinning process required constant attention to tension and twist rate, as too little twist would produce weak yarn that would fail under stress, while too much would create thread so rigid that it could not be woven into flexible fabric. Master spinners could judge the optimal twist by the feel of the yarn between their fingers, producing thread with precisely the characteristics needed for its intended use in the final tent. The horizontal ground loom represented one of humanity's most elegant solutions to the challenge of creating large textile panels under nomadic conditions. This device consisted of nothing more than wooden stakes driven into the earth to create a rectangular frame, yet it allowed weavers to produce fabric strips several meters in length with remarkable precision and consistency. The warp threads running the length of each panel were stretched taut between the stakes and held at precise tensions that would determine the final characteristics of the cloth. The weft threads were passed back and forth through the warp using simple shuttles, building up the fabric one row at a time. Control of the weave density represented perhaps the most critical skill in the entire tent making, process. The weaver had to create fabric that was tight enough to provide structural strength and weather resistance, while remaining loose enough to allow air circulation during the scorching desert days. This balance was achieved through careful attention to thread tension, beating pressure, and the natural characteristics of the goat hair itself. Too tight a weave would create fabric that trapped heat and became unbearable during summer months. Too loose a weave would fail to provide adequate protection from wind-driven sand or winter rains. The individual panels produced on these ground looms measured approximately 50 centimeters in width and several meters in length, dimensions determined by the practical limitations of the weaving process and the need for manageable fabric sections that could be transported and assembled into larger structures. These panels were sewn together using stitching techniques that distributed stress evenly across the seams, preventing the concentrated forces that could tear the fabric during severe weather. The resulting modular construction allowed families to adjust the size of their tents as circumstances changed, adding or removing panels as the household grew or contracted. The paradox of the black tent challenged every assumption about desert survival, yet scientific investigation has revealed the sophisticated physics underlying this counterintuitive choice. When researchers finally studied Bedouin clothing and shelter systems in detail, they discovered that black fabric in a desert environment could actually promote cooling rather than heating, provided the system was designed to take advantage of specific thermal dynamics. The dark surface of the goat hair tent absorbed intense solar radiation, but instead of simply transferring this heat to the interior, it created a powerful convection engine that drove air circulation throughout the structure. The mechanism behind this cooling effect operates on the principle of thermal stratification and pressure differentials. As the black tent roof absorbed sunlight and heated up, the air immediately above the fabric became significantly warmer than the surrounding atmosphere. This heated air naturally rose, creating a low-pressure zone directly above the tent surface. The physics of fluid dynamics demanded that cooler air rush in to replace the rising hot air, but the tent's design channeled this replacement air from ground level, where temperatures remained lower due to the shade cast by the structure itself. The result was a continuous circulation system that pulled hot air away from the living space while drawing in the coolest available air from the immediate environment. This natural air conditioning system became even more effective when desert breezes provided additional energy to drive the circulation. Even gentle winds increased the pressure differential above the tent, accelerating the flow of air through the structure and enhancing the cooling effect. The low profile of the tent was crucial to this process, as it ensured that the heated air layer remained thin and unstable, promoting rapid convection rather than allowing heat to build up in a thick, stagnant layer above the fabric. Scientific measurements of tent interiors during peak desert conditions revealed temperature differences of 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit between the outside air and the space beneath the goat hair roof. This cooling was achieved without any external energy input, mechanical systems, or consumable resources beyond the intelligent arrangement of natural materials and the harnessing of physical forces that were present in the environment anyway. Modern air conditioning systems consume enormous amounts of energy to achieve similar temperature reductions, yet the Bedouin tent accomplished this feat using only the sun's own energy turned against itself. As the desert day gave way to night, the same black fabric that had driven cooling during daylight hours transformed into an insulating blanket that helped preserve the warmth accumulated in the tent's interior. The thermal mass of the goat hair and the trapped air within its weave retained heat more effectively than the rapidly cooling desert air outside, while nighttime temperatures could plummet 40 degrees or more below their daytime peaks. The tent interior experienced much gentler temperature swings, providing a buffer zone that made the extreme conditions bearable for sleeping families. The tent's response to precipitation demonstrated perhaps the most remarkable aspect of its self-regulating behavior. When winter storms brought rain or even snow to the high desert regions, the goat hair fibers absorbed moisture from the air and began to swell. This swelling closed the microscopic gaps between individual threads, transforming the breathable summer canopy into an effectively waterproof membrane within minutes of the first raindrops. The natural oils preserved in the goat hair enhanced this water resistance, causing droplets to bead and run off rather than soaking through the fabric. Research conducted during actual desert storms confirmed that properly constructed goat hair tents remained completely dry inside even during prolonged rainfall. The same fabric that had allowed cooling airflow during the scorching heat of summer sealed itself against winter weather without any human intervention or mechanical adjustment. This automatic adaptation to changing conditions represented a level of sophistication that modern materials science struggles to match even with advanced synthetic fibers and chemical treatments. The structural stability of the tent during severe weather conditions relied on principles similar to those used in modern suspension bridges and tensioned membrane structures. The multiple anchor points and carefully adjusted rope tensions distributed wind forces across the entire fabric surface rather than concentrating stress at weak points where failure might occur. The black tent existed not merely as shelter, but as the foundation of an entire civilization that had adapted to life in motion across the vast expanses of the Arabian Peninsula, Syria, Jordan, the Sinai, and the Negev Desert. For over a millennium, Bedouin tribes had perfected the art of nomadic pastoralism, following ancient migration routes that connected seasonal pastures and water sources scattered across thousands of square miles of seemingly barren landscape. Their survival depended on maintaining herds of goats, sheep, and camels that could extract sustenance from desert plants that other livestock could not digest, converting sparse vegetation into milk, meat, and the raw materials needed for portable homes that could be assembled and dismantled in a matter of hours. The tent represented the core technology that made this mobile way of life possible, but its significance extended far beyond mere practicality into the realm of social structure and cultural identity. In Bedouin society, the tent fabric itself belonged to the women of the family, representing both their skill as craftspeople and their authority over the domestic sphere. A woman's ability to weave, maintain, and repair tent panels was considered essential knowledge that determined her status within the community and her value as a marriage partner. Mothers and grandmothers served as the primary teachers of textile arts, passing down not only the technical skills of spinning and weaving, but also the accumulated engineering knowledge that had been refined over countless generations of desert living. The education of young girls in tent construction functioned as a comprehensive curriculum in applied physics, materials science, and environmental adaptation. Through hands-on participation in every stage of the process, from selecting and preparing goat hair to adjusting fabric tension during assembly, girls absorbed an intuitive understanding of how natural materials behaved under different conditions. They learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when fibers were properly prepared, when weave density was optimal for specific applications, and when structural adjustments were needed to accommodate changing weather patterns. This knowledge was never recorded in written form, but was instead embedded in the practical skills that ensured family survival in one of Earth's most challenging environments. The interior organization of the completed tent reflected the complex social dynamics of Bedouin culture, with space allocated according to strict protocols that balanced practical necessities with cultural traditions. The tent was typically divided into distinct zones using portable cloth partitions that could be adjusted or removed as circumstances required. The front section, closest to the main entrance, served as a public reception area where male guests were entertained and tribal business was conducted. This space needed to accommodate visitors who might arrive without warning, as desert hospitality customs required that travelers be offered food, drink, and shelter, regardless of their tribal affiliation or personal relationships with their hosts. The rear portion of the tent constituted the private family domain where women conducted daily household activities, children played and learned, and intimate family discussions took place away from the formal atmosphere of the guest area. Cloth screens could be raised or lowered to control visibility and airflow between these sections, allowing the same physical space to serve multiple functions throughout the day and across different seasons. During extreme weather, all partitions might be lowered to create a single unified interior that maximized warmth and protection, while during mild conditions the screens could be raised to promote air circulation and create a more open living environment. The tent also functioned as a powerful symbol of tribal identity and social status within the broader Bedouin world. The size and quality of a family's tent communicated important information about their wealth, their skill as herders and craftspeople, and their commitment to traditional ways of life. A large, well-maintained tent with intricately woven patterns and high-quality goat hair fabric indicated prosperity and cultural sophistication, while also demonstrating the family's ability to offer generous hospitality to guests and visitors. The tent's appearance became a form of non-verbal communication that conveyed social information across tribal boundaries and helped establish relationships between groups that might otherwise have no direct contact with each other. The principles behind the Bedouin black tent extended far beyond the Arabian Peninsula, appearing in various forms among nomadic peoples across the arid regions of the Middle East and Central Asia, wherever similar environmental challenges demanded portable solutions to extreme climate conditions. Kurdish herders in the mountains of eastern Turkey and northern Iraq developed their own variations of goat hair tents. Adapting the basic design to accommodate higher altitudes and different seasonal patterns while maintaining the core engineering concepts that made the system effective. Iranian nomadic tribes, particularly those moving across the high plateaus of the Zagros Mountains, created tents that incorporated local materials and decorative traditions while preserving the fundamental thermal regulation properties that made goat hair fabric so well suited to desert and semi-desert environments. The shared logic underlying these diverse tent traditions reflected the universal challenges faced by herding societies in harsh climates, where survival depended on maintaining mobility while providing adequate shelter for families and protection for essential possessions. Each regional variation represented centuries of local adaptation and refinement. As different groups discovered how to optimize the basic tent design for their specific environment, available materials, and cultural requirements. The consistency of certain design elements across these widely separated cultures suggested that the engineering principles involved were so fundamental that they were independently discovered and refined by multiple groups facing similar survival challenges. Material selection varied significantly depending on the animals available to different nomadic groups and the specific environmental conditions they encountered during their seasonal migrations. Tents with higher camel hair content commanded special status among wealthy families, as camel fiber provided exceptional durability and weather resistance while also serving as a visible symbol of prosperity within communities where camels represented the pinnacle of desert-adapted livestock. The longer, stronger camel hair fibers could withstand years of repeated assembly and disassembly while maintaining their structural integrity under conditions that would destroy lesser materials. Sheep wool found its way into tent construction primarily for interior applications, where softness and comfort took priority over raw strength and weather resistance. The choice of materials often reflected complex economic and social factors that extended far beyond simple availability. Trade routes connecting different regions allowed nomadic groups to acquire specialized fibers that were not locally available, creating tent fabrics that combined the best properties of multiple animal sources. Wealthy families might commission tents that incorporated rare fibers or exotic dyes obtained through long-distance trade networks, transforming their shelters into displays of economic success and cultural sophistication that could be recognized and appreciated by other nomadic groups encountered during seasonal movements. Traditional al-Sa'ar weaving patterns served functions that extended far beyond mere decoration, encoding information about tribal affiliations, regional origins, and family histories in geometric designs that could be read and interpreted by knowledgeable observers. These patterns functioned as a form of visual literacy that allowed nomadic groups to communicate complex social and cultural information without relying on written records that would be impractical to maintain during constant travel. The specific combinations of colours, motifs, and geometric arrangements used in tent bands, cushions, and interior partitions told stories about the weavers who created them and the families who used them, preserving cultural memory in forms that could be literally carried from place to place as communities moved across vast landscapes. Seasonal adaptations transformed the basic tent structure into a flexible system capable of accommodating dramatically different environmental conditions throughout the annual cycle. During harsh winter months, families might add temporary, windbreak walls constructed from additional fabric panels or natural materials gathered from the surrounding landscape. These extensions could include specialized cooking areas that vented smoke while retaining heat, storage spaces that protected essential supplies from moisture and temperature extremes, and animal enclosures that kept valuable livestock close to the main living area where they could be monitored and protected from predators or theft. The tent system extended beyond the basic shelter to encompass an entire portable camp infrastructure that could be expanded or contracted depending on the specific needs of the moment and the resources available in the immediate environment. The enduring wisdom embedded in the Bedouin black tent reveals fundamental principles of environmental adaptation that challenge modern assumptions about how humans should interact with hostile natural forces. Rather than attempting to create an impermeable barrier against the desert's extremes, the tent system worked in partnership with heat, wind, and moisture, transforming potentially deadly environmental forces into the very mechanisms that ensured survival. The scorching sun that could kill an unprotected person within hours became the engine that drove cooling airflow through the tent interior. Fierce winds that could blind travelers with sand and dust were channeled and moderated to provide gentle ventilation that made life bearable during the hottest parts of the day. Even the sudden winter rains that could flood desert valleys and destroy inadequate shelter were welcomed by the goat hair fabric, which used the moisture to seal itself and provide waterproof protection. This cooperative approach to environmental challenges stands in stark contrast to modern strategies that typically rely on overwhelming natural forces through energy-intensive mechanical systems and synthetic materials that resist rather than adapt to changing conditions. Contemporary climate control systems fight against heat with refrigeration, against humidity with dehumidification, and against temperature variations with constant energy input from external sources. The Bedouin tent achieved superior results by accepting and redirecting environmental forces, using the desert's own energy against itself to create comfortable living conditions without any external power requirements. The selection of materials that possessed inherent intelligence represented perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the entire system. Goat hair fibers functioned as biological sensors and actuators, automatically adjusting their behavior in response to temperature and humidity changes without requiring any human intervention or mechanical control systems. When conditions demanded cooling and ventilation, the fibers naturally maintained the loose weave that allowed air circulation. When rain threatened to penetrate the shelter, the same fibers swelled to create an impermeable membrane that protected the interior from water damage. Modern engineers struggle to create synthetic materials that can match this level of autonomous adaptation, often requiring complex sensors, actuators, and control systems to achieve responses that goat hair accomplishes through its natural cellular structure. The mobility principle that guided every aspect of tent design reflected a fundamental understanding that survival in harsh environments often depends on the ability to relocate when local conditions become unsurvivable. Rather than committing to permanent structures that might be overwhelmed by extreme weather events or depleted resources, nomadic peoples developed shelter systems that could be rapidly disassembled, transported, and rebuilt in more favorable locations. This strategy provided resilience against environmental threats that could destroy fixed settlements, allowing communities to maintain continuity across generations despite facing regular challenges that would devastate less adaptable populations. The integration of essential knowledge into everyday activities ensured that critical survival skills were continuously practiced and refined rather than being stored in external references that might be lost or damaged during emergencies. Technical understanding of fiber properties, structural engineering principles, and climate dynamics was embedded in the routine tasks of spinning yarn, weaving fabric, and assembling shelter, creating multiple redundant pathways for knowledge transmission that could survive individual accidents or social disruptions. When these traditional practices disappear, entire libraries of environmental adaptation techniques vanish with them, leaving modern populations dependent on complex technological systems that may not be available during crisis situations. The implications of Bedouin tent technology extend far beyond historical curiosity into contemporary discussions of sustainable development, disaster preparedness, and climate adaptation. As modern societies grapple with increasing energy costs, supply chain vulnerabilities, and extreme weather events, the principles demonstrated by traditional nomadic shelter systems offer alternatives to resource-intensive approaches that may prove unsustainable in the long term. The tent's ability to provide comfortable living conditions using only locally available materials and renewable energy sources presents a model for low-impact shelter design that could be adapted for emergency housing, off-grid communities, and regions where conventional infrastructure is impractical or unaffordable. Standing in the cool, dark interior of a properly constructed black tent after walking across sun-scorched desert represents more than simple physical relief from dangerous heat. It demonstrates humanity's capacity to observe, understand, and work with natural forces to create solutions that are both elegant and effective,